Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. In today's episode, I'm joined by Nolan from Funky Fresh Reptiles. Nolan is a 16-year-old keeper that is already super advanced in the hobby. He's already vending expos with his own business. He's breeding lots of cool species. In today's episode, we talk about breeding leopard geckos. We talk about breeding dart frogs. We even touch on some tarantulas. It's a very, very cool episode that I think you are all going to enjoy. But before we get into today's episode, as always, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Also, this is episode 98. We are now 2 weeks away from episode 100, and I just wanted to tell you guys that I am going live on February the 13th. We're going to go live at 7 p.m. We're going to have some special guests come on. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please make sure you join us. It'll also be an opportunity for you guys, a bit of a question and answer, a little bit of an opportunity for you guys to get involved with the podcast. It will be fun. There will be special guests, and there will be giveaways. So make sure you join us February 13th on this channel right here on YouTube. And there will be a 100th episode that'll come out in the morning. And then, like I said, 7 p.m., February 13th, I will be going live right here on YouTube. Anyway, without further ado, everybody please help me welcome Nolan from Funky Fresh Reptiles. Nolan, hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm very excited to this episode. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting one. You've got a lot of cool species, but before we get into those species, tell me a little bit about Nolan. How did you get started in the hobby?
Well, where do I even begin? It's always been like my entire life I've been immersed in the world of animals. So my mom and dad got an Amazon parrot. Her name's Cookie, before I was even born, about a year before I was born. And she's still alive to this day. For 16 years now I've had her. And so that was kind of like the open door to the animal world. And then further from that, the passion from my mom and dad has passed down to me, so that we always would watch animal documentaries. We'd always watch and read encyclopedias and whatnot. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. I got my first leopard gecko when I was 5. And I actually still have him. He's in this enclosure right here. And he's the father to a bunch of babies that I produce and everything. And I've had him for 11 years now. And then it's just completely snowballed from there.
That's awesome. And I assume people do the math, and you don't have to answer the question if you want to, but just for the audience to know generally, how old are you, Nolan? If you're okay with answering that.
No, that's perfect. I'm 16 years old.
Awesome. Yeah, you are quite young and already super involved in the hobby. We met at the Calgary show, and you were already vending. You had your own booth. You have your own species that you've bred. Like you're super immersed in the hobby at only 16. So I'm sure by the time you're a little bit older, you're going to be the top of the top breeders. And just off that, so you said you got your first leopard gecko. Did you end up getting more leopard geckos?
Yes. So probably would have been about 4 years afterwards, I got a female who's actually the mother to all the babies that I've produced as well. And I still have her as well. They're both doing great. And then I've started recently getting into the black knight morphs of leopard geckos. And so currently I've got a black knight mandarin that I got from Reptiles. And I hope to get her into some further breeding projects in the future. We'll have to see. The market is kind of iffy right now for black knights in Alberta, but we'll have to see in the future what that will hold.
It always bounces back, right? Like there are trends, ebbs and flows in the market. Something gets saturated, and then eventually the market opens up again. So I'm sure if you keep working with that project, it'll come back. You said Black Knight Mandarin. Now I know what the Knights are. They're like almost an all black leopard gecko. What is Mandarin? Is that a morph? Can you explain that to me?
So it's kind of like a submorph. So when you've got the black knights, and I see a lot of people do it with tangerines as well, with the tangerine morphs, they'll cross them as well. And so it's pretty much the same thing. And then it's given the name Mandarin. And so it's got like the black and the oranges. It's really, really neat. And so you get like the deep, kind of almost darker oranges along with the dark blacks as well. It's a really neat combination.
That's very cool. I really do enjoy all black animals. Like one of my favorite boa morphs is the IMG, and like I really enjoy the black animals. So the Dark Knight, I think I've never leopard geckos. I'm definitely not a leopard gecko person, but if I was to keep a leopard gecko, I think it would be the Dark Knight. So was the mandarin that you were working with before then?
Actually, no. I just dived right into the Black Knight Mandarins. I was originally going to work with just strictly Black Knights, but the opportunity came up. Steve with Got Reptiles, he ordered the lighter version of the Black Knight Mandarin. He ended up getting the darker version, so he just quick sold her, and I was able to jump on that quite quickly within a day from when the shipment came in, and then I was able to pick it up and begin working on that project.
That's awesome. And I hear Dark Frogs calling in the back, so we'll definitely jump to Dark Frogs in a couple of minutes. But maybe
Awesome.
we'll just stick to the leopard geckos for a second. Tell me a little bit about the breeding process. Is there a specific season when you pair them? Can you breed them year round, or like how does that work?
Well, generally, I find the best trends actually starting around this time, around January. And so I'm not breeding this season. Next season, I might, but on a regular season, if I were to be breeding, I would start right around this time, pairing up the males and the females. And then usually about early February, we'll get the first eggs. And then they're actually, leopard geckos are temperature sex determinate. And so
Cool.
the temperature that you incubate the eggs will actually determine the sex of the offspring. And so I usually incubate mine for a mixed sex at around 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you can also do that with like the higher the temperature, the you'll get males, and then the lower the temperature, you'll get females. And then people always say like if it's above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you'll get the spicy females or something like that, and they're not viable. It's just a whole funny like myth and joke within the hobby, but yeah, and so they're temperature sex determinate, and so I'll sorry about that. I'll I'm just kind of rambling on here. We'll take
No,
a
you're
quick
all good.
pause here, if that's all right.
You're perfect. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Take your time. But you actually you answered the question I was about to ask you as well. I'll touch on that quickly. So you said the warmer temperatures are the males and the cooler temperatures are the females.
Yes, that's right.
And then you said anything above 90 is non-viable. So like too hot to incubate.
Yeah, that's right. And so basically, yeah, nothing will occur from that point on. People always say, and they always joke about it being like a spicy female or a hot female that will hatch out, but I've never seen anything from that actually occur.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. You said the tag behind you right now is your leopard gecko female, or your leopard, one of your geckos, correct?
Yes, that's right.
I'm noticing the light goes on and off. Is that because you have it on a thermostat?
That's right. Yeah. So I keep it around, I believe it's around 32 degrees Celsius on the basking spot. And so I've got the thermostat set to that. So if it goes at or above that, it'll shut off temporarily until the temperature again decrease a little bit, and then it'll turn back on to maintain that homeostatic temperature of 32 degrees Celsius.
That's very interesting. And do you use a heat pad in the enclosure as well? Or is that your only source of heating?
That's the only source of heating. Heat pads generally aren't the best. We're seeing a trend that's moving away from the heat pads, primarily because of the fact that one they can potentially burn the animals, as they're not often put on thermostats like the lights are. Secondly, to that is they can't actually properly digest their food with the heat mats. So the light fixtures can actually break through a couple different layers of their skin to properly help digest the food, whereas the heat mats can't do that.
Fascinating, fascinating. I ask this question frequently actually because I'm kind of testing two different things with my snakes right now. Some are on heat pads and some are on heat lamps, and I find that the ambient temperature is a better remains better with the heat lamps as well than it does with the heat pads. Because, the heat pads only heat up one small area, and if the snake is not sitting, they're kind of useless.
Right.
I'm still testing. I'm not sure what I prefer, but that's very interesting to hear you say that. Is it is there something under it? Like, do you have a slate or rock under it that kind of retains that heat as well, or is it just over the substrate?
No, I've got like a slate tile over top, and so it's just flat. And then underneath, I actually have another hide that has been dug in, and so it's used as a multi-purpose. And so it'll retain that heat, and then he can go on and bask and get that belly heat that leopard geckos require as well. And then he can also just go there and bask from the top as well.
Very, very cool. Yeah, that's super interesting. And when it comes to the breeding, once again, what substrate are you using for the females to lay their eggs in?
For the females, just for their lay bins, I use straight cocoa fiber. It's the nutritional value doesn't really mean anything in that sense, and it retains humidity pretty well, which is the most important part. So I just use straight cocoa fiber for their lay bins.
Yeah, and you're spraying it down every so often to kind of keep that moisture in there?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Very cool. Very, very cool. And what about the rest of the enclosure? Are you team substrate or repticarb? You know, I've seen a lot of different leopard gecko enclosures, and everyone seems to like different things. What do you use?
So right now, I've got out of the 4 enclosures, I've only got 1 that's fully bioactive. The rest of this month, I'm actually using to get all of the other 3 enclosures into bioactives with custom enclosure backgrounds and whatnot. And so in the non-bioactive enclosures, I'm just using straight paper towel rolls. I've been using those for a couple years, and I've had great success with it. It's easy to clean. It provides no risk of bacteria to harbor within like repticarpet does, and it's also better for their nails and for their teeth, which you see in repticarpet where they'll get their nails stuck or their teeth stuck at a certain point throughout within the fibers of the repticarpet. So I've had pretty decent success with the paper towel. But soon I'll be getting everyone into bioactive enclosures with loose substrate, and so I use reptisoil, topsoil, and sand as well within those.
That's awesome. And what does it entail to make a bioactive leopard gecko enclosure? Because we see a lot of bioactive tropical enclosures, but I think the bioactive arid enclosures are a relatively new thing in the hobby. So what do you plant it? Do you use microfauna in there? Or yeah, maybe you run us through a leopard gecko bioactive enclosure.
Yes, absolutely. So this is actually my first one that I've got set up. And so it's completely experimental, but I've done hours of research on top of that. And so firstly, it's the substrate, and you don't want to have it like a tropical substrate. It's a lot different. And so I find that you do 70% topsoil and 30% sand, like a play sand. That's the best. That's the best. So it drains really well, whilst at the same time remaining just a little bit of humidity, which is important for the more humid parts of the environment. In terms of planting, I do use plants within it. I've actually started experimenting with pothos. I saw a couple of videos actually where people reuse pothos in leopard gecko enclosures on the humid side. And so mine aren't doing that well at the moment, but we'll have to see. Like I said, it's all experimental. But other than that, I use a lot of succulents and airways, Haworthia, aloe vera, snake plants, a lot of different other succulents as well, and it works perfectly for them. And then in terms of microfauna, I've got the temperate white springtails and powder blue isopods, which is the Porcellinides perinicis, in there at the moment. And then they actually seem to be doing really well. I haven't seen any like a drop or an increase in their populations just yet. Mind you, it's only been about 3 weeks so far. And so it's a little too early to set those trends just at the moment. But they've been doing really well. And then I also just recently added darkling beetles to the enclosure as microfauna as well, and they've been doing great as well. They really get in and get the pupa and other nasties, just like with the isopods.
That's very cool. And when you say darkling beetles, that's superworm beetles, right? I know that's not the official term for them, but superworm beetles,
no, that's right? Yes, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
very cool.
I've got farms of my own, and so I always get beetles. And so I was like, oh, I'll just throw a couple in there and see how it works from various videos and other research that I've seen.
Yeah, I've never used them on purpose. but I've had superworms escape out of worm bowls and just pupate in the enclosure, and so I just find the darkening beetles just walking around sometimes, and they seem to be do like you said, seem to do a great job. They seem to survive in situations where isopods don't generally thrive, I would say.
Yes, precisely. And they're a little bit more hardy in terms of that more arid environment that the leopard geckos require as well.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns of the leopard geckos trying to eat them?
Not really. No, they do a pretty with this between the size of the enclosure and then the size of the beetles, along with their capability of hiding. It's of minimal concern at this moment in time.
Okay, awesome. And then so I keep jumping back to the breeding. And then so so back to the breeding. You've now got your eggs. They've laid them in the cocoa fiber. You're collecting and incubating them. First of all, what do you use as an incubator, and how long till they hatch?
So I use the Zoom and Breptibator actually, and it works absolutely phenomenal. And then as the incubation medium, I just use straight unfertilized perlite. And so you can get these, I believe it's Exoterra, the lay boxes, and they'll have little indents for each egg. And so it actually fits perfectly for the size of leopard gecko eggs. And so I'll put the perlite right on the bottom and spray it and get it all nice and humid. And then I'll put the tray over top and then lay the eggs. You have to keep the eggs upright at a specific point, because if you turn it too much, the yolk will actually go in and suffocate the offspring in the egg. So you have to be quite careful with that. And then yeah, I pretty much I seal it completely, and then I'll burp it every couple days just to ensure it gets oxygen. But from that point, once I get them into the incubator, it usually takes just under 2 months for them to hatch.
Okay, so they're pretty quick.
Yeah, it is. It is quite quick compared to a lot of other species.
Yeah, mountain horn dragon eggs take like half a year to a year. So
My
just under
goodness.
2 months, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You said you can't rotate the eggs. So how do you decide the orientation to put them in the lay box? Is it just you pick them up in the same orientation they were laid in? Are you candling them to see where the yolk is, or how does that work?
That's right. So when I first pick them up, however they're laid is how I'll keep them, and then I'll mark them with a Sharpie to know which side is upright and which side was the original side, right? And then when I go to candle them, I just hold them. I don't twist and turn them at all. I just hold them up and then shine the flashlight on, and then you're able to see the viability of the egg.
That's awesome. Have you ever seen like to where it's closer to where it's gonna hatch? Have you ever seen like a tail or a foot or something in the egg?
I've seen the heads, but it's been kind of difficult to see everything else. But you can make out some key parts within it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It sounds a lot like I used to breed crested geckos, and it sounds very similar. I
Yes.
used to also, as I uncovered them, I put a dot with a Sharpie on them. That was the orientation I'd pick them up in. Now, over time, I found that, I don't know if how different they are, I found that it doesn't matter as much with crested geckos as what people say with other species. I could just be crested gecko eggs are a little hardier than most. But that is fascinating. It's the same method, and once you candle it, you can kind of see. I've seen tails. I've seen little. I guess it depends on if they're pressing against the egg or whatever. But I've seen little feet. I've seen the head as well. I've even seen some movement inside. It's very cool to see for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So now you have the babies. What's the next step? How do you raise them? Do you raise them similar to the adults, or what's your hatchling setup like?
So I use, contrary to a lot of popular beliefs, I use the breeding racks primarily because it's strictly temporary, right? And so once they go to their new homes, they're going to be going into bioactive enclosures and everything that they require. But in terms of sterility and being able to observe them and observe their poops and observe everything, I just use straight paper towel with I have a calcium dish in there. I've got water dish in there, obviously, and then a couple of hides as well to ensure that they're able to get the protection that they need should they feel in a vulnerable state. And so, yeah, I keep it completely, entirely sterile. just in order to observe and monitor their not only their growth rates but how much they're pooping, what their poops look like, the if there's any like concerns if they're bleeding or whatnot. It's easy to tell that with paper towel.
Very cool. Sorry, you mentioned you use a like a rack system.
Yes, that's right.
What do you know what the brand of the rack system or whatever is?
I actually got it off of Kijiji, which is the Canada's version of Craigslist, and it was it was a homemade breeding rack, and so it had
Cool.
heat tape on it and everything, and so there's no specific brand attached to it.
That's very cool. Very cool. And so you have them in this setup. See, we're getting a whole tutorial on breeding leopard geckos, people. So you have them in this setup. What? How long are you leaving them in those setups before you decide? Okay, they're ready to sell, maybe, or maybe they're ready to upgrade into a new another enclosure. Like, what's your process like?
Well, usually I'm quite lucky with them because the bins are 12 quart bins. And so by the time they're actually able to go to their new homes, which is usually around 4 to 6 months, depending on their weights and depending on their overall behaviors. Usually about 4 to 6 months. And so they actually don't outgrow the bins, which is perfect. So they're able to stay in there the entire time that I have them and I'm working with them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now I'm gonna ask you something about. I'm sure you've heard of like the spider morph in ball pythons and that kind of thing. I
Yes.
think it's a neurological issue. I've heard, and I could be very wrong, and I don't know if you know anything about this or not, but I've heard that there's a specific morph in leopard geckos that is the same thing, and I could be wrong, but I think it's called Enigma or something.
Yes, that's right. I was just kind of when you were saying that, I knew exactly what you were talking about. So I was like, Enigma. It is the Enigma morph. I haven't done anything regarding them. I stay away from them for the exact same reason why most people stay away from breeding spider ball pythons, to kind of cut that neurological issue from occurring into future generations. But yes, that's precisely right.
Awesome. So it's the same kind of thing. Is there uh I know it's a morph, so you could probably tell from like the patterning, but is there like a behavioral thing that can indicate that this maybe has this problem?
I'm not actually too sure. I haven't done too much research into it. However, from other videos that I've seen and whatnot, and research that I've done, it's pretty similar to like a lizard version of the spider morph in ball pythons. And so they'll kind of just you can obviously tell they're just out of it. They seem quite off. You can see it in their heads. You can see it in their head movements as well, and in their other bodily movements as well.
Yeah, I wonder if they're also bad at striking or catching their prey and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, that's definitely attributed to it as well.
Fascinating, fascinating. So Dark Knight Mandarins.
Yes,
Are you
absolutely.
pairing? Yeah, are you pairing um, two Dark Knights to each other, or do you pair them back to a normal or whatever you have, or what is your plan there?
So what I plan on doing, it's been kind of hard to find a male. Mine is a female, and so I've been on the search out. I've been on the lookout for a male. But they are, I would because they're so line bred. I wouldn't risk breeding them with a normal morph, because that entire that all that work to get to the Black Knights is just going to crash with the normals. And so it's really like a 50-50 chance. You can either get some really interesting morphs from the offspring, or the entire season will just be normals from that, because that dominant gene is just going to take over and not allow any Black Knights, and so that entire project would crash. Whereas I've seen with Black Knights, usually they're just pairing them with other Black Knights. When you get into other more line bred morphs, such as the Mandarins and the Tangerines, that's where it's kind of okay because they might mix, and they have, as seen in the past, and as seen with this one as well.
Cool. So you're kind of on the lookout for a male Black Knight then.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, we'll jump off the leopard geckos. I'm going to test my knowledge of frog claws right now. I kept dart frogs for a very long time. I don't keep anymore. But if I'm not mistaken, the frog I'm hearing calling right now is an epidobates.
That's right. Yes.
Nice. I still okay. Cool. So how many species of dart frogs do you have? I know that's the one we hear calling, but do you have any other species? What are you working with in terms of dart frogs?
Yes, so right now I'm working with three different species of dart frogs. I've got the Dendrobates tinctorius azurius, or the blue poison dart frog, and then the
Awesome.
Epipidobates anthoni Santa Isabel. Those are the ones that you hear calling. And then just at
Awesome.
the Calgary show that we met at, I got a pair of Ranitomea variabilis southerns, which is the I think the common name is the Zimmerman's poison dart frog, but they've got the greens and the blues, and they're just absolutely stunning. And so I'm
Very
working
cool.
with them right now. They're just babies, but I hope to get them up and begin breeding them as well.
Yeah, my favorites were the Ranitomea as well. Or when I
Yeah.
was working, I had the Santa Isabels. I had the actually from the Epidobates genus, I guess. I had the Santa Isabels, the Ancas, tricolors. So I had them all, and then I had a bunch of different Dendrobates, and then I had one species of Ranitomea, which was the Vanzolini, and just they were by far my favorite. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the call or their behavior or just size of them, but I think you can enjoy working with Ranitomea as well. Once they're old enough to call, they have a beautiful call as well.
Absolutely. I actually just set up, just over the past couple of weeks, I just set up a 12 by 12 by 18 enclosure with a custom
Nice.
background and whatnot, and specifically
Awesome.
for Ranitomea vanzolini. And so it's in the grow out stages right now, but in a couple months, I hope to be able to work with them because yes, one, they're so bold, they're prolific breeders, and their calls are just absolutely stunning as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so you said you set up a bioactive enclosure. Is there specific plants? I know when we were talking before the show, you said you were kind of working with some cool species of plants now. Are there specific plants that you like to use in dart frog vivariums, or you want to tell me a little bit about the plants you're using there?
Yes, absolutely. So my favorites are the Ficus pomeas, which is the creeping fig, primarily because I don't know, there's just something about it, the structure of the leaf, but then also the fact that they can just completely cover and completely take over an enclosure is so incredibly fascinating. But it actually looks pretty nice in my personal opinion. And so I'm working with just the regular Ficus pomea, but then I've also started working with the oak leaf figs as well, and
Nice.
they've been doing great and carpeting really nicely over the past few months.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the look of it as well. It gives it more of that. I mean, all plants when it takes over give them that jungle feel, but the Ficus pumila really does give it that jungle feel right off the bat. I actually I bonsaied it to a piece of spiderwood in one of my enclosures in the past, and it was a lot of work to keep up with because it does grow once it takes on. It does grow very fast, but it is a beautiful plant, and seeing it kind of bonsaied on that tree, it's a very very cool species of plants for sure. So how many bioactive tanks did you set up?
Um, well, over this past Christmas break, I did three large enclosures, and one of them I'm actually not even finished with yet. But
Awesome.
overall, at the moment, I've got, let's see, four, five, five enclosures right now, and then one more in the process, and then three more for the leopard geckos. So
Awesome.
lots in the works, and lots at the moment as well.
I love that. Do you have any plans for all of those enclosures?
Yes, all of them are already thoroughly planned out and whatnot. And so in two of the 12 by 18s, one of them we already talked about, which was the Ranitomea vanzolini. And then the other 12 by 18 will house the pair of the Southerns, the Ranitomea Southerns. Um,
Nice.
and then I'm working on an 18 by 18 by 24, which will have it'll be a paludarium with a waterfall feature on it. That one I'm
Nice.
not even sure what's going to go in it yet. There's so many possibilities from tree frogs to other species of dart frogs, particularly the Amirga species, the Amirga basileri, the chrome blues. I really like to work with. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. My parents are saying
Beautiful
to go with
species.
red-eyed tree frogs as well and to start breeding them. I'm thinking of glass frogs. There's the possibilities are endless in that sense.
Yeah, no, I mean all of those options are really good options. Um, yeah, all really good options, and I think all would do. I don't know too much about glass frogs, but I know that the Amirga and the red tree frogs would definitely enjoy the water feature in the paludarium. and you could probably end up
Yes.
with just tadpoles in the water right there. You won't even need to. Are you already breeding tar frogs?
Yes, I am. So I've been breeding the Dendrobates tinctorius azureus for it's coming up on 2 years actually, and they've been doing great. I've got a pair, and I was lucky enough to for it to be a 1-1 pair, and so all of my offspring and dart frogs I've gotten from them. And then I originally got three Santa Isabels from Jungle Jewel Exotics, and then unfortunately they're all males. And so from the bug guys, I got a sexed female from them just at the past Calgary show as well. And so
Awesome.
I haven't seen any eggs yet, but hopefully in the coming weeks and in the coming months there should be eggs momentarily.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's your process with the tinks? Is it are you finding the eggs and pulling them out, doing it on your own, or do you let the eggs mature in the enclosure and wait for the parents to move them, or like what do you do for the yeah? What do you do?
So yeah, for the tinks, what I've got the system where you have the petri dish underneath the coconut hide, and then I've also been experimenting with the new Exoterra coconut hide as well that has the built-in petri dish, which it's actually been working really nicely. And so
That's
I
awesome.
always will check it every week or so for eggs, and then once I find eggs, I'll take it out and I'll put it into a larger kind of like deli cup, like a container, and then I'll mist it and get the humidity nice and high in there, and then I just watch the development of the tadpoles. And so then I always go in with like a turkey baster as well, and then once they've actually hatched from the eggs, I'll put them into their own separate 32-ounce deli cups with treated water and then some Indian almond leaves as well. And then as they're continuing to grow, I'll do weekly water changes with the turkey baster. I find it's just the easiest with the turkey baster, and then you can really get in and get all the debris from the food, the debris from the poop and whatnot, and then you can really filter that out and make sure that the water's at the perfect level for the tadpoles. And then, yeah, as they begin to mature, they begin to grow their back legs and their front legs, and then eventually absorb their tail. And I use the technique that you've used, where you actually tip the 32-ounce deli cup to its side, and then that actually gives more surface area for the tadpoles to emerge once that time comes. And so it's been working out really well so far. So I've had no complaints with that process.
That's awesome. You are making me miss keeping dart frogs, man. I need to get some dart frogs again. They were a lot of fun. Yeah, that's exactly what I used to do. Exactly. I used to put them all separate, the 30 ounces, like you said, and tip them over and all of that. Then later on, I still kept all the other species separated, but I found that the epidobates, and I was working with Phyllobates vitalis, I could actually raise the tadpoles together in like a big tub with a filter and all of that, almost like an aquarium, and just put a piece of cork floating on the top, and they would climb out on their own. But that method was still the easiest I found. I don't know what it is about it, but it was foolproof, I guess. It's very cool. I'm glad you're breeding dart frogs. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've seen those like they'll do like the mass tadpole enclosures, and I've seen lots of success with it. My primary concern, which was just regarding the tinks, and then Dion with Reptiliatus talked about it as well, is just reducing that competition. But yeah, with the epidobates and everything else, you can just have those mass enclosures with the tadpoles, because when you see it in the wild, inside of bromeliads or inside other water pools, it'll be that same process. There'll be a whole bunch of tadpoles within that one area.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What are you feeding the tadpoles?
Right now, I'm feeding the tadpoles a mixture of high quality fish food, and it's been working really good. It's like these tadpole bites that you can get from the pet store. I'm not quite sure the brand, but it's been working great between the both of them. And then also various leaf litter as well. The Indian almond leaves is my primary go-to for them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you're making me miss our frog, man. But yeah,
Oh, very
so
well.
yeah, I wonder, see, like you have that method going on, it's great. I wonder if once you have something in the paludarium, if you'd even have to go through all that hassle, or if they will just kind of breed in the. I never kept dart frogs in a situation where the whole process could happen on its own. So I wonder if in the paludarium, once you get some frogs in there, if you won't even need to worry about that.
Yeah,
It
I'm
could
really
very well be a
curious.
thing.
Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
curious how that's going to turn out because, like, you often see it with a lot of the Oophaga species and the large obligate species, where you don't have to do anything. You have a couple of bromeliads in there, and they'll lay the eggs and they'll feed the tadpoles and whatnot with the unfertilized eggs, and then they hatch and then they just emerge out of the water and the bromeliads, and it works entirely on its own. And so we'll have to see if something like that happens similarly in this paludarium.
Yeah, it would be very cool to watch for sure.
Yes, indeed.
Very cool. Yeah. So okay, so Nolan, we're gonna jump back to where I asked you at the beginning of the episode how old you were. You said you were 16, and so this is the question. The big question I have for you is obviously you're still in school.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
I am. Yes.
Awesome. So you're in school all day. I'm sure you have a lot of homework. You have exams. You have all of this. So the question is, do you find it tough to keep up with all your breeding projects and your pets and all that while going through school, or do you have some kind of system set up in place, or how does that work?
I do have a system. I have a strict routine that I follow by where there's a specific time for animal chores, there's a specific time for schoolwork, there's a specific time for everything else that happens in the day-to-day life. But sometimes it does get difficult when you're overrun with 7 exams in a week. Your animals, while being the top priority, are pushed aside just the tiniest bit, right? So if it's okay, I'm going an extra day without cleaning, that's okay. It's not life or death. But as long as they have water, as long as they have access to food, that's the biggest thing at that moment. But I never let it get to a point where it's entirely overrun and then the lives of the animals are at stake.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely not an easy thing for sure. I was keeping fish when I was in high school, and it was kind of the same process of like some weeks I'd have plenty of time to do my water change, breed the fish, feed the babies, do all of that, and then there were some weeks where it's like I need to skip water change this week. So I can only imagine with having reptiles, it might even be a little bit even harder. So good on you for being able to do it and kind of maintain that system.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's definitely been some trial and error process in it, but everything that I've got going on right now is seemed to be working well, so definitely can't complain.
that's awesome. And so back to the animals. We've talked about the leopard geckos. We've talked about the dart frogs. You're also keeping tarantula, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. And when I saw you at the Calgary Expo, you had some adult tarantulas that you were selling for. You had them listed as breeder only. I guess they were adult males that maybe you didn't have the females for, or something like that. Have you ever considered the option of breeding tarantulas yourself?
Oh, I've always considered breeding tarantulas. Specifically, like when my mature male, Poecilotheria metallica, when he matured out, I was like, perfect. I could just get a female and we can breed them. And like think of the entire process, how fun that would be. My parents weren't entirely too keen to that.
I'm sure.
um,
I'm sure.
Primarily just in the mass of the numbers on top of everything else. And so we're gonna postpone that for the moment in time, but there's definitely been lots of consideration and research into tarantula breeding.
Yeah, I mean, like from what I understand, they have like 100, 200 babies at one go, and a lot of pups and a lot of feeding to go through. So I
Yeah,
don't
that's
blame
right.
you for sure.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So what's you mentioned? Post. I suck with tarantula names. Post. Say the name, please.
Poecilotheria metallica.
There you go. You said it flawlessly. Okay. Is there any other species that you're currently keeping?
Well, at this moment, I've got 14 species that I'm working with. And so
Wow.
a couple of them are within the Poecilotheria genus. And so I don't work with Poecilotheria metallica anymore. In a couple months, hopefully we'll get some more in the
Fingers
reptile
crossed.
room. But but I'm working with the ornatas and the regalis right now. And then some Kilobrachys species, the Kilobrachys and the Tanacharum. I still have that mature male. from the Calgary show. I haven't been able to find him a female just yet, but hopefully in coming time he'll go off onto a breeding project as well. Tarantulas marinus, the infamous OBT, I just began working with.
Cool.
Theraphosa species, the Theraphosa apophysis, which is the pink-foot Goliath bird eater. I just recently picked up actually like a whole bunch of tarantulas just back in December, at the end of December, and so in that it was actually a trade. So I with someone in Calgary, I was like, he posted an ad for Asian forest scorpions, and then he mentioned in the description that he was open to trades. And I was like, oh, I'll just send a message and tell him what I've got: the dart frogs, mourning geckos, a bunch of plants, everything else. He's like, yeah, absolutely, that would be perfect. And so he wanted to trade all of the available baby dart frogs that I've got, and then a couple mourning geckos as well. Or I got to pick and choose between the list of tarantulas available that he had. And so we worked out that deal, and it was I picked up the Tarantulas marinus, the Theraphosa apophysis, Davos pentaloris, Pseudohapalopus species, yellow, blue, among others. And so it was great. And then, of course, a couple Asian forest scorpions as well.
That's awesome. So you did get the forest scorpions?
Yes, that's right. I was at that point where I was originally going to get like 5 or 6 of them, but I was like, well, there's some nice tarantulas on this list, so let's add them in there, specifically the Theraphosa apophysis. And so I only ended up getting 2 Asian forest scorpions, but no regrets in that sense.
Yeah. Do you know if they're a pair?
No, not yet. They're just small scorpions.
Tiny little ones. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently picked up some Asian forest scorpions as well.
Awesome.
I think I have a gravid female. I'm not sure. But I have 4 Asian scorpions at the moment. I think I have a gravid female, I have a tiny baby, and I think the other 2 possibly are female, so I may try pairing them soon. But I think I'm going down the scorpion path very soon. They're so cool. They're awesome. How do you have yours set up?
Yeah, so well, cool. Right now, just because they're so small, I've only got them in like the 5-ounce cups, with which is a small hide, and then they're substrate.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. So still didn't need to kind of set them up in a proper enclosure or anything like that.
Yeah, that's right. They're so small at the moment. They're just born they just hatched at the beginning of November, and so they're still like just pin size. They're still eating like pinhead crickets and whatnot. So there's definitely lots more growth and lots more molt in them before we're able to get them into a larger setup.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I have nothing more about the forest scorpions other than they're so cool, and I think I want more scorpions very soon.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely looking into some more species, like even some of the hotter species, like the Titia species and then the Hottentotta species. They're just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, same here. I very much like the Tityrus stigmerus, I think it's pronounced. Apparently they're a parthenogenic species. So that's maybe right. I'll try my luck with those soon as well. But yeah, very cool. So Nolan, we met, as I said, 100 times. So we met at the WCRE, which is the Western Canadian Reptile Expo, and you were not there as an attendee. You were there as a vendor.
Yes, that's right.
Do you have any more plans of vending future reptile expos?
So I've actually already booked for the 2025 fall WCRE as well. And then they just announced a couple months ago, they just announced the spring show. Yes, that's right. I haven't booked onto it yet, but hopefully right away, I'll be able to get that going as well. On top of the newer show called the Terraria Herpetoculture show, which is held in Red Deer. And so they did their first kind of pilot show back in October, and it seemed to have been a great success. I wasn't able to make it because it landed on Thanksgiving, unfortunately, but it's turned out to be a great success. And so I hope to get on there this upcoming year as well. And then, of course, the Calgary Reptile shows.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't have any fixed plans yet, but I'm hoping to come back for the WCRE April one, the spring show you just mentioned. They just announced. So fingers crossed. Awesome. I'll see you there again. I'm very excited. I very much enjoyed Calgary. Everyone there was awesome. The people were awesome. The I found a different variety of species available than what we have at our shows here. So it was a lot of fun for sure. And yeah, fingers crossed. I'll see you again very soon.
Absolutely. Now I really have to book onto the spring show for sure.
Now you got it. Well, I mean, even if you don't, even if you're not there as a vendor, I'm sure I'll see you there.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
so you are planning to vend future shows. You are planning to make this somewhat of a business. Do you have any other plans in terms of species or in terms of? I know you mentioned possibly a YouTube channel or anything like that. What's in the books for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've got kind of the W series was that takeoff into building the business a lot more. And so between, yeah, I don't post on YouTube that much, but I've got a couple of videos lined up that I'm just in the process of editing. So I hope to upload a lot more and a lot more frequently as well. And so
Awesome.
building that online and kind of influencer aspect as well, looking up to you guys as well, is a great inspiration. And then yeah,
Thank you.
maybe even starting a podcast of my own. I've already talked to a couple of people and see if they're interested in it and interested in coming on the show. And so that's been gaining some traction shortly. I've started a website as well. I'm just in the midst of building that as well. That will provide international and, well, potentially international, but more or less a national shipping throughout Canada, and then possibly into the States and other countries as well. And
That's
then yeah,
awesome.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Sorry. No, no, go ahead. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then yeah, no, so much work with species in the future. I'm really pushing more into dart frogs, which has been awesome. And so yeah, hopefully having these three species that I've got, all of them are I plan to breed, and then along with the future species, the Ranitomea species. And then I'd also really like to get into Ufaga as well, because they're just absolutely phenomenal. And then to begin to work with them more, a lot of different vivarium plants, and then some more gecko species. I'm thinking I'd really like to get into Europlatus.
Cool. Is there a specific species of Europlatus you're thinking of, or just Europlatus in general?
Well, I'm 50-50 right now between the Europlatus fimbriatus and the Europlatus fantasticus. Sydney, Sydney with tree critters is actually in Calgary where I am, and so it's perfect. We always talk about the fantasticus, which is great. And so that's kind of the open door in that sense. I haven't run into too many fimbriatus. Nelson has some with tails and scales. He's got a couple of them sparsely from time to time, but hopefully the more we can get them in, and then the more we can work with them, the more we can get captive bred specimens into the hobby.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely an underrated species that more people need to be working with. I definitely agree. Definitely agree. And jumping back to the well, first of all, let me say if you are considering starting a podcast, please do. There can never be enough reptile conversations happening online. I feel like the more of these that are happening, the more information we cover, the more tips and tricks get shared between people. So definitely go for it, and definitely you know push the YouTube channel as well. And you mentioned the website. Now, is this going to be for selling some products, or are you going to be listing your reptiles and your babies on there as well?
It'll be also, first of all, thank you for that. I'll definitely reach
Yeah,
out and everything, and go further with that for sure. And then yeah, the website will be for all of the listings of everything that I have available between plants, lots of different feeder cultures as well, and then of course all of the available animals that I've got at the time.
that's awesome. You said feeder cultures. I see the fruit flies behind you. What other
Yes.
and you mentioned earlier that you had a superworm farm, I believe. Are there any other feeder species that you're working with?
Right now, it's just between the fruit flies and the mealworms. However, I'd really like to get into discoid roaches. My parents, or my mom specifically, is not the biggest fan of roaches. She despises them quite strongly, and so I don't know how much traction that will go with. But I'd definitely love to go into those roach species that are illegal in Canada, as they're great feeders. But then they're also I've also heard they're not that difficult to breed. They've been pretty good to breed overall, and so continuing with that on the business should be great.
I can confirm they're fairly easy to breed, but they're very slow. So
Yes.
I have tons and tons of babies, but all the babies have none of them have reached adulthood yet, and it's been quite a while. I will say, and they do need heat, but they're great eaters. They breed very prolifically, and they're great feeders as well, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad that we finally have roaches in that we can feed our reptiles in
Absolutely.
Canada. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
get
It's been a
jealous of
slow
all the people in the
process.
States. Yeah, it's too slow. Too slow. Well, they're great variety. Crickets are great, but crickets stink, and crickets
Yeah.
are noisy,
Yes.
and I don't know. Yeah, I've been very happy with this quite since I got them, and I apologize to your parents if they're listening to this, but I encourage you to do it. Yeah, they're great. They are great. That's awesome. Well, Nolan, you have been an absolutely incredible guest. I hope one day we'll get a chance to do a part two and have you on again, and maybe by then you'll be working with some other species of dart frogs and maybe reptiles as well, and we can talk about some of your other breeding projects. But thank you very much for coming on. You are absolutely awesome. I look forward to hopefully seeing you again very soon. And I just noticed we mentioned the YouTube channel, but we did not mention the name of the YouTube channel, nor did we mention Instagram name, nor any of that. So how about you let us know where can everybody find you? What's the channel name? What's your Instagram name? All that jazz. Let everybody know where to
So
find you.
awesome. Well, everything is under Funky Fresh Reptiles on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook as well, and then Patreon.
Nice.
And then it's under
Nice.
X, formerly Twitter. It'll be Funky Fresh Herps because I wasn't able to do reptiles, so it was like Herps was the next option in that sense. And so
Yeah, perfect.
everything is under the same name. The website will be under the same name, and then the podcast. I haven't figured out a name entirely yet, but it'll have Funky Fresh something in there. So we'll have to see, but
Perfect.
it'll all be under that same title.
That's man. All those links will be in the show notes, will be in the description. So please go give Nolan a follow. That's Funky Fresh Reptiles on everything except for I believe you said X is Funky Fresh Herbs. What do you post on Twitter? What do you post on X? Are you
I
active on
almost
there?
I almost never
No.
post anything. I think the last thing
Yeah.
was like I just posted one picture of it was like haul from the WCRE 2024.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
not
Sense.
that active on it, but
I'm not on there either. I mean, there is a Daffy's Reptiles X page, but I'm not active on there. I don't really. Um, it's so hard to create different pieces of content for all these social media platforms already. So I'm just like, I'll give up on one of them and kind of focus my energy in other places. But yeah,
yes.
anyway, everyone, please go give Nolan a follow, show your support. If you're in Calgary and you're looking for leopard geckos, dart frogs, what else? I believe morning geckos too. We didn't even mention those. I think you're working morning geckos as well.
Yeah.
Reach out to Nolan. Dude, you're awesome. I'll wrap it up with that. You're awesome.
Awesome.
I very much look forward to seeing you again soon, and I'm sure we'll talk soon as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's just been an absolute pleasure.